Max Verstappen is a four-time world champion. George Russell wins in Vegas. This is the Shifting Happens Las Vegas review. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Shifting Happens. My name is Baxty B, and I'm delighted to say that I am joined by Rory, AJ, and Marshall. How are we all doing, chaps?
We're good. We're good. It's it was a long night. I mean, the race was at 1 a.m. So
So, mate, it was like I've been up at 5 to 6. Rory and I have had the early shift.
Yeah, my sleep schedule is absolutely banjaxed. It's broken. For the first two Thursday, Friday. I stayed up too late for my liking, and then I was like my sleep schedule. I did the smart thing. I went to bed early. I got up at 5:30, and then I just watched the race, and that was it.
It's crazy, the timings for everyone. I mean, you guys are going through the night. We're up at first thing in the morning. It's, oh my word. Anyway,
It is what it is. We've done it for Suzuka before, so.
Yeah, we all have early starts at some point during the season, though I appreciate, as a European, I have a lot of privilege in this situation. So with our nice little lunchtime races for most of the season. So, okay, so let's get into our review of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Your race winner was George Russell, Lewis Hamilton in second place. You can see that I have come prepared for today's pod. And in third place was Carlos Sainz. But the big news of the day, Max Verstappen, four-time world champion. It was inevitable. We knew it was going to happen, but it was officially confirmed today that he is going to be the world champion this year. He did it with a very composed, very mature drive, made some early gains and then realized, okay, look, Lewis in the Mercedes is too quick. I'm not going to fight it. And then the Ferraris as well. Like, I don't need to fight them. Lando's behind me. I'm all good. It's fine. And he came home in style to win his fourth world championship. And yeah, I mean, he now joins an illustrious list of people that have won at least 4 world titles. He joins Fangio, Schumacher, Prost, Hamilton, and Vettel. And he also joins Fangio, Schumacher, Hamilton, and Vettel as 4-time world champions consecutively, winning 4 titles consecutively. And also, further to that, I want to give some credit to Red Bull. In the space of 15 seasons, they've won 8 drivers' championships, and they've won them 4 in a row. And no team has ever had one driver win 4 championships with their team, and they've done it in 15 seasons. That is absolutely bonkers. I mean, huge credit to Red Bull, to Christian Horner and Adrian Newey and the work that they've done over the course of the last 15 years. It's unbelievable what they've done. So, yeah, Rory, as the sort of half in, half out Red Bull fan, your feelings today on seeing Max win yet another championship?
Yeah, to be honest, I was actually surprised it happened in Vegas. I thought with maybe how the weekend started with Red Bull not bringing the right rear wing configuration and having to chop and shave off as much of that rear wing as possible to get some straight line speed and some downforce. I actually thought it was going to go into the Qatar Sprint is where he probably could have won it. But yeah, I think like we mentioned in the previous podcast, I don't think we all kind of came to the conclusion that it wasn't going to be like a last down in the Abu Dhabi title decider. It's going to be either Vegas or Qatar. But yeah, I think this is one of the championships for Max out of his 4 that it's one of his best ones. That yes, he had the dominant car for the first 6 races, but where it changed after Miami, where he had to kind of be consistent with a car that wasn't at the pace of his title contender Lando Norris, his McLaren. he had to be consistent. He had to be measured. Yes, he had his moments with Lando in Austria where they both collided. Hungary, where Max had kind of lost his temper a little bit, and especially in United States where we had some more controversy between the two. I think it was one of Max's measured drives over the whole season. I think it shows that this championship showed him why he's one of still the drivers to beat on this 2024 grid. That he is the one you have to, like Lando said, yes, when he has the fastest car, he's on it, but when he's not, doesn't have the fastest car, he's still makes mistakes. One thing you have to applaud Max for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. His consistency, particularly in the really crucial moments, getting results when he looked like he was going to really struggle and come up short in a lot of ways, has been remarkable. AJ, your thoughts on Max's title win?
Honestly, if there was any title where I would say this definitely cements him in the top 7 of all time, I think this would be the title that sort of like did it for me. Because yes, he had a dominant car for the start of the season, and that's where he built a big enough gap, sure. But to be able to maintain that gap and to be able to be there and thereabouts, even in a car that's not as dominant, I think that just goes to show how good of a driver he is. And he has had some amazing drives this season. That just goes to show the level that he's at compared to a lot of the others on the field. Probably the most consistent among maybe 2 other drivers, I would say, on the field this season. Just great season all around. I mean, we saw instances of him being typical Max where he was aggressive, but that is why people like Max. It's the same reason why people like Michael, right? It's the driving style, and you just grow accustomed to appreciate the type of driver that they are, and really, really well deserved. I genuinely think very well deserved. If he wins another one next year, then there's going to be significant rearranging happening for the top 5, top 10 on the grid of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you follow me on social media, you'll see that I've released my updated list of all-time greats. I've actually moved Max up to 6 from 9. So, I mean, for somebody that doesn't like Max Verstappen particularly well, I'm rating him very highly. But Marshall, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we've been clear it's been inevitable for a while, but still, he's got the job done, and he did it emphatically. Really, I mean, there was no stress for him at all today.
Well, I think I've been saying right from mid-season, Red Bull was clearly on the decline, and Checo was having his nightmare season. Every weekend, it seemed like something was going wrong for him, and Max was just constantly maximizing, no pun intended, his results. Basically, I think, and this is probably going to be a controversial statement, but it just goes to show how peerless he is in terms of the current crop of drivers, because he's always able to put in that result, which maximizes what the car is able to provide at that particular day. I think that, his competition, I mean, we have a historic season where 7 drivers have won 2 races or multiple races, when you include Max's wins in that. It's just if it was Max against the field, he would take the field on race wins by a lot here, but nobody else has been able to consistently deliver despite their car deficiencies at various points in the season like he has. I think that it's very clear to me that he's at the top of the field, and anyone who's going to try and dethrone him is going to epically deserve it. I just don't know who that person is going to be. I think there's several contenders. I think anybody in the top 3 teams has a chance at it. But I don't know who that's going to be over the course of an entire season, because you just see if he's got a car that's any in the vicinity of, winning, he's going to be there. And I'm looking forward to next year. I'm hoping that this carries over. I'm hoping that we don't start with we don't start with the other teams on the back foot and McLaren having a terrible start. Like, everybody shows up for the first race and are ready to compete. That would be the ideal. But just the end of the season has been great. This is almost like a reverse 2013, where we had a great start to the year and then Vettel won all the races. This has been like Max won all the races to begin the season, and then the end of the season became a great jumble of all these different winners, but the championship is already decided.
It's 2009, isn't it? With Braun.
Yeah, it's a lot like Button kind of hanging on, except I think Button really faded, where Max has been
Max has held on.
Delivering. Yeah. But I know that we're going to get into it, and I do think that Charles is obviously one of the ones that might have the quality to take him on. I just I don't know who it's going to be, and I just look at this current group and I'm just not sure. That, not to say that anyone can't beat him, because Red Bull might have sufficient problems that car for 26 or even 25 that's competitive, and even he isn't going to be able to win in it. But assuming that they're thereabouts, he's going to be very tough to beat.
I think AJ is, if you've been paying attention to him whilst Marshall was talking there, he's been waiting to come in. So we go to our resident, Lek Fozy.
Hey, I wear it loud and proud. But here's the thing, right? This is where I think I disagree with Marshall, because don't get me wrong, Max has been outstanding this season. But this has always been a point of contention in my discussions, in our discussions in general, whether it's here, whether it's in our chat or in spaces, whatever it was. And I've always brought this up to Marshall. I do not think he is as peerless as way you describe it. And the reason being, if you look into the other drivers' performances, right, they have significantly had a more inconsistent car in an underperforming team. So if you look at someone like George, he maximizes his results every single time he can. When he doesn't, it's usually a team error or the cards just don't align for him. Charles this season has been absolutely consistent throughout from start to end. Mind you, both Mercs and Ferraris this year have not had the best car at all. They were always second or third, never first at all. First was always either Red Bull or McLaren, right? There were weekends where they were strongest cars, sure. In that sense, I do not think Max is peerless, because there have been other drivers on the grid this season who have put in an equal level of consistency. Fine, let's put away drivers who are in the top teams right now, right? The ones who are going to be competing with Max, the way I look at it, it's going to be Charles and George. Give them the car, give them a consistent, stable car throughout the season. They will push Max to the edge all the way throughout. A driver lower in the field, extremely consistent, pulling miracles in a complete crap box. Gasly has had a very stable season all throughout, if we're talking consistency season-wide, and being able to pull performances in cars that are not great. So in that sense, it is my point of contention. And I still admit, like Max is already in my top 7 drivers of all time right now. But to say he's peerless in this current grid, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
See, my whole is we don't really have a measuring stick to determine how disadvantaged he was by that car at any point in the season because his teammate is just not delivering. So if he's Checo Perez on his best day, he's still doing way better than anyone in the top 6. So it's really how you evaluate Checo's struggles in terms of that car, how you evaluate Max. And I can't. The thing I struggle with is believing that Checo is this bad. That's the problem that I have, is like there has to be a level above that Max is reaching right now that's just making Checo's struggles look even more apparent and desperate. If this car is what it is in the hands of Checo Perez, then he's a miracle worker. I don't think it's that. I think a lot of it is just Checo is not getting to grips with the car, but just looking at how close together the performances of the teams like Sainz and Leclerc, Hamilton and Russell, and looking at, Piastri, how close he is to Lando. Nobody has had that discrepancy between their teammates, so it makes it extremely hard to compare. And, the thing that I want us to have more than anything else is a championship battle between Max and Leclerc, so we can finally put this discussion to bed, because I want to see it too. Like I want to see how he fares across an entire season with equipment that's equivalent to Max. I think that Red Bull since midsummer has been a truck. That's just, I can't prove that. It's just how I feel. It's like how I see it is, that Max is really doing miracles in that car, but who knows? Who knows what someone else would do, because Red Bull seems loath to put anyone else in it as a matter of, I don't know why, but we'll see if they do next year. But I mean, it's very subjective. I admit that you can't really evaluate Max because his teammate is struggling so badly. It's very, you compared him to Schumacher. It's almost like Schumacher in '94 when, no matter who his teammate were, they were a back marker, whether it was Max's dad, or it was JJ Leto, or it was Johnny Herbert in the last couple of races. Like he was just head and shoulders 2 seconds a lap better than them. So it was really hard to say what that Benetton really was in anyone else's hands. So kind of his whole career at Benetton was like that. So maybe that's another point of comparison for those two drivers being very similar.
Yeah, I think the thing, with Max, I mean, people have been doing the super time analysis on it. I know our friend and colleague Shez likes to do super time analysis, and actually he's looked at it, and actually the Red Bull has been. Good evening, Henron. We see you, friend of the channel. He said that actually the Red Bull on super times has actually still just been the quickest car this year. Now, whether that's testament to Max or whether that's that the Red Bull has been quicker and there's just been track characteristics that have suited other cars like the Ferraris and the McLarens and the Mercedes, perhaps. But Max, on the whole, and Red Bull has been the closest car. I know Shez has posted the analysis on his social media pages for those that like to get into that sort of stuff. The thing for me with Max this year is that it's kind of been a double-edged season for him, because firstly, I feel like in some ways he's proven he's not quite as good as some of his fans say he is. Because I mean, at some points over the last couple of years, we've had people coming in saying, like, oh, Max could win in a Haas. You could put him in any car. He could win in a Williams. It's like, well, no, he can't even win in a Red Bull that isn't doing what it needs to do. And that's like completely disproved. But at the same time, he's shown how good he actually is, because he's and where I think he's really shone this year is in qualifying. I've always thought Max is a decent qualifier, but I thought, yeah, Charles probably a bit quicker. George is probably a bit quicker. Lewis is probably a bit quicker over one lap. But this year, Max has been outstanding in qualifying. You know, I think he's really pushed himself into really good areas and proven me wrong in qualifying. I've been pleasantly surprised by his qualifying performances this year. And it's in this second half of the season when the car hasn't quite been doing what he wants it to do, and he's still sticking it on the front row. It's like, okay, yeah, fair play. Doff my cap to him. So, yeah, Max is a 4-time world champion, and I'm sure we'll have discussions about his legacy, how he compares to Vettel, and also, who his teammate's going to be next year. Keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll have discussions about that, I'm sure. But you will notice that I am wearing Mercedes shirt because today was a wonderful day, a hallowed day, a blessed day. It was a Mercedes 1-2. George Russell getting the win. Our producer, Fly, working in the background, he is the president of the George Russell fan club in Miami. So if you want to jump on, please do, because we're gonna talk about your boy first of all. Absolutely incredible performance by George Russell today. He got the pole. Look, Mercedes have had the quickest car this weekend. This was shades of 2014 where they topped every single session. I was living in dreamland. It was great. But it's amazing. We used to take these for granted as Mercedes fans, and now it's like we've had to work really hard for it. We've had to fight back. And it's amazing to see this level of performance, even if it is probably just a one-off because it's cold tracks. I mean, how more British can you get? It gets really cold, and the Brits are really fast. Like, it's just, I mean, George was so far ahead he could have had a cup of tea in the middle of it. Like, it was amazing. And Lewis's drive today. We'll talk more about Lewis in a minute, but this is the George section of the Mercedes chat, and I just thought he was remarkable today. From start to finish, proving a lot of his critics wrong. Everyone said, "Oh, he only ever inherits his wins," or no, he earned that today. Everything aligned for him. It was perfect. Rory, I'm going to chuck it to you. Your George today.
Well, we can confirm that Mercedes just designed their cars in a freezer at this race because of the cold temperatures. But no. No, honestly, I think George, like you said, Mercedes had the pace all weekend, even if it was a cold track for some reason. Even Toto Wolff, the Mercedes garage strategy team, drivers said, we don't understand why we're quick. We just know we're quick. We're just here, we're quick. We predicted Qatar to be a better track, and now we're here, we're on track for a win. And they got their 1-2. We'll talk about Lewis, about his qualifying activities, but I think Russell today, they got the strategy right for the second stop of the race. They had the margin. They had 30 seconds, so they could take it easy and still come out in front. And I think George kind of just showed that, like, yes, when the car is in that perfect window, I am able to capitalize on it, and he did today. And I do think we'll have to see how Qatar goes, of course, if they're going to be competitive or not. But this is a bit jumping into next year. I do think Mercedes are still they're still confused about this car. It's off. Their tools they're using is their wind tunnel on their simulator is telling them one thing, and they don't. And there's track time. They're saying they have track. They have time on the track, but it's also not. But no, I think George this weekend and Lewis, if he had and Lewis, even with his qualifying, did very well.
Completely agree with everything you're saying. I mean, there are wider issues with Mercedes which need to be addressed, and hopefully they can address that going into next year with Kimi coming into the team. But I think 25 is probably going to be a bit of a burn year for them. But this is why we need to take the time to really celebrate these moments, because they have been few and far between the last few years. I mean, what I will say is they have improved. I mean, they've gone from winning one race in 2022 to no races last year to winning 4 races this year, that's a massive improvement. Regardless, it doesn't look as good because you've got McLaren and Ferrari duking it out for the championship. So it is unfortunate in that way.
Before we go ahead, I have to do a dig at McLaren. If Mercedes win another race, they will have nearly the same amount of wins as McLaren.
They would be equal, aren't they? Because they were on 5, and Mercedes ain't winning a world. They're not winning again this year. Let's be honest.
We need more time to laugh at McLaren as an organization.
If McLaren, who have had probably for me the fastest car for most of this season, do not win anything this year, we are going to have, and this is a slight preview, the biggest McLaren cookout we have ever seen. I mean, Zach Brown getting roasted by Max. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Max was doing an interview and Zach Brown walked up to him and said, well done. He goes, and Max just goes, yeah, so you said I could only win in the fastest car, so I proved you wrong. Which I enjoyed immensely. We do have a comment from Shez in relation to George Russell, or from Tired GP, with it is Shez. Is George the most underrated driver on the grid? AJ, I'll let you come at that one first.
See, I honestly, it's the perfect timing because I saw Shaz's comment on Tired, and it was exactly what I had in my mind. I know all of us talk about how I keep saying Charles has been having the most underrated season and the most consistent driver alongside Max, but no one has spoken about what George has done this season, right? That drive in Canada, in the Canadian Grand Prix, the drive where he got disqualified because the car was underweight. And then last week not last week, but just before the break in Brazil, where the team messed up what would have definitely been a win for George, and then him completely stomping the entire grid this weekend. George has very quietly gone under the radar in a car that does not deserve to be there. And he has pulled off absolutely brilliant performances this entire season, and no one is shouting about George. Instead, a lot of people are putting him down, saying, I'm sorry about this, Baxty, but he's not Kimi, he's Antonelli. There's only one Kimi right now. Everyone shouting about George not being able to be up to par with Antonelli next season, and Antonelli is going to be the number one. Have you really been paying attention to what George has done this season? Like, ask yourself, sit through it, think about this entire season, think about the drives that George has had. If anything, he has cemented the fact that he will definitely be able to compete for a driver's championship. Put him in a consistent car, give him a shot, he will be pushing Max off the road. George is that good. You're talking 4 race wins easy that he did not get this season. Definitely one of the most underrated drivers. Like, it blows my mind that no one is raving about George's season. And again, this is because there's so much bias about the people on top, right? That those who aren't always fighting for first and second, or first, second, and third, it just slips everyone's minds more often than not. There's been so many good drivers this season that are either in the middle of the pack or low on the grid. They've done some brilliant drives. And I think George, among a lot of them, has gone significantly under the radar. Massive props. And I think Antonelli under George, Mercedes are going to be fine. They're going to be fine in the future.
Yeah, I mean, Marshall, your thoughts on George? I mean, is he the most underrated driver, do you think? Or
yeah. I think he is to battle Max on the track in the way that Max needs to be fought in order to be beaten. Like, I think we've seen a lot of times between him and this year where he just bullies Lando, and Lando just doesn't have the ability to just give it back how Max gives it to him. I think in the limited times we've seen George and Max wheel to wheel, I think that I think George is the most terms of a wheel-to-wheel driver, in terms of giving back what he's being given. Like, he's not like I think Max is just default aggression. Whenever he's in a wheel-to-wheel battle, he tends to default towards the, no holds barred sort of option. Again, very Schumacher-esque. But I think that George is very good at matching the energy and knowing who he's battling with. And in like that with Lewis, he's been very, very careful. He's been very measured. He's been very, very good at, taking the opportunities when he's been given. But when he's been beaten by Lewis, he's given him the tough but fair treatment. And I think when it comes to Max, he's going to give him exactly what Max gives him back. Times for somebody with an axe to grind, that's what has to happen in order for respect to be earned. I know that will be controversial with some folks, but if contact is unavoidable, or somebody puts their car in a position where they are going to come off first and you are going to come off second best, and there's no other alternative, Mansell and Senna used to have their run-ins all the time, and Senna used to say that Mansell was the only one that he respected, because he knew that if he was alongside of him, that he was going to get back what he was given. And, made him react. It made him at least look in his mirrors. And I think that if, I want to see the George versus track, and I want to see the Leclerc versus Max battle, because I want to see like the consistency and the strategy and the battle as well. But I know that they're going to do it in a different way. With George, it's going to be elbows out, and it's going to be, a matter of losing points in the situations where it calls for it. And then, hey, maybe if it's a three-way battle, it's a clean Leclerc win because he comes up between the two of them. I'm really looking forward to 2025. I hope that we get some decisive answers on this, because all of these questions are very theoretical. I hope that Mercedes takes a step and joins that leadership group every weekend. And I actually hope Piastri as well, because it's been an underrated bit of a scruffy year for him. And he deserves to be in that fight too. And then if we have a true McLaren battle as well as one with Hamilton, and like 2025 is shaping up to be an amazing season. And I just hope that we get all the promise that it's showing.
I also want to just come in quickly on Double's point about the aggression. I think I agree. I think George can give Max what Max would give him. We saw it this year with Lando. Lando wasn't able to give the aggression what Max was giving him. Lando was like still in that phase of like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. Max is in that mindset that I will run you off the road if I have to. And Lando, yes, we saw in Austria a little bit, but overall as a season, Lando wasn't able to match that aggression that that Max was displaying in front of him. And I think with George, we've seen with George, he's had some instances in Baku 23 or GA23 where he went up the inside of one of the turns and the apexes and he put a hole in Max's side pod. But I do think if we get a consistent, like Double said, that it's consistent between George and Max on track and they're fighting with each other, then we can see, I do think they'll match aggression. And I think George is able, unlike Lando, he's able to be calculated in his moves. With Max, I think we've seen him in other situations with Lewis. I think he's started to learn from George, is learning from Lewis to study his opponent and know when that driver is going to make a mistake, and then he can capitalize on it. The thing with Leclerc and with Double another point is that I do think we've seen that Leclerc, Max, I think the only driver at the minute Max trusts in a one-to-one fight is Leclerc. And we've seen that in 2022 with the DRS chicken. Max wouldn't have done that with Lewis because they would have either been a brake check or it would have been a collision. I think that DRS chicken saga kind of showed that Max and Leclerc respect each other and trust each other in those situations. And you can even see that in like their driving. I think it was Brazil or was it It was one that Mexico that Max was behind Leclerc and he just kept telling Leclerc, yeah, it was Brazil, that Max Leclerc Charles was making too many mistakes, and Max was just like telling him on the radio. And I think that shows. I think that's the only driver at the moment that Max is comfortable in a one-to-one on-track fight on the highest levels. The thing that I think with Leclerc just needs to improve is that being calculated. I think he's calculated. I just think with the aggression part, he just needs to rein that in a little bit with his calculate, because he's able to be like make decisions on point, but that's the consistency. He needs to be able to be consistent in his aggression and his calculated. And I think that's what everyone needs to match Max. And Max is calculated and aggression, and his aggressiveness is on point. And that's what I think is what Double was talking about, the peerless. I think it's just that Max needs to match Max. You have to be controlled aggression the whole time in that sense, and consistent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this goes back to the theoretical discussions we had like 10 years ago, when it was like, oh yeah, who would win out of Vettel and Hamilton and equal machinery, and they never quite had equal machinery, and then we finally got it, and Lewis won twice. So that ended that discussion stone dead. But speaking of Lewis Hamilton, what a drive today, but a mixed bag weekend, because he was so quick, and then in Q3, please do excuse my language, he shat the bed quite massively with a lock up and then a tank slapper on his last run, and his tires weren't quite up to scratch, and so he started P10, and then he had a damn good race today. He was magnificent as well. I mean, both George and Lewis were magnificent for very different reasons, and that's what made the 1-2 so good. Is because both drivers just delivered. Lewis, it was the drive that showed me that anyone that's doubted him, and I include myself in this, that had any doubts about his ability behind the wheel, are unfounded. Because if you give him the car, he's still got it. He can still has that turn of speed. And it was a magnificent drive today from Lewis. It's I mean, I've seen some people saying, "Oh, it's one of his best drives ever." It's not. I mean, Lewis has got a catalogue longer than my right arm of incredible drives, but this was his best drive of the season. I would say better than Silverstone, and it was. Yeah, I can't say enough good words about it. I know there are those that are moaning that Toto wasn't nicer about it. I'm not going to get into that now. But this was just an incredible way for Lewis to start this last triple header with Mercedes. AJ, talk to me about your future driver.
Hamilton fans were upset at Toto? No way.
I know.
I mean, look, Lewis coming to Ferrari, that's always been exciting. Like, it's at the end of the day, it's Lewis coming in, right? And I've always said this, the overreaction from some fan bases, and I've said this to you as well, is absolutely ridiculous. Like, Lewis has, yes, qualifying, we have seen over the last 2 seasons, he's not been at it. He's not been at his best. He's not been what he used to be. Sure, we can all see that. But if you look at his races and you look at what he does on race day, I don't think there should have been any doubt to begin with that he has lost it. Because even though he's struggling with cars, and then we come and have, like, again, I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this, but there's quote unquote sabotaging that Mercedes are doing to him, right? He is going through multiple different setup changes. He's just trying and testing out the cars, and he's still making it work. He's still getting in the points. He's still fighting for places. He's still overtaking drivers. When does it show that he's lost it? I'm sorry, but if I'm going to make a comparison, if you're talking about older drivers who've lost it, the person who's lost it is Fernando, not Lewis. Fact of matter.
Stirring the
Fact of
pot
matter.
there. Stirring the pot there.
Saying it with chest, man.
You were gonna
saying
get
it
that
with
one
chest.
in, weren't you?
I had to.
You were gonna get
I
that
had
one
to.
in.
Yeah.
I said
yeah.
that Fly was the chairman of the Miami George Russell fan club. I think AJ's the president of the Canadian I Hate Fernando Alonso club. Got to just
any opportunity to put an invalid dig in at Alonso, and Ajit's just right in there with the knife, just like from the top rope.
Yeah,
I own it. No, but it's great. It's great seeing him prove doubters wrong, and you also see that online, whether it's threads, whether it's Twitter, wherever it is, you've always seen people stick by Lewis, and I'm glad that people have stuck by Lewis in a sense of not doubting his abilities. And this is not praising the nonsensical, crazy sabotage group. Like that is no.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's been hard the last 3 years as a Lewis and Mercedes fan, seeing the struggles that he's had, but after today, he can go and drive 2 stinkers in Qatar and Abu Dhabi for all I'm concerned. Today has shown me everything I need to see before next year, and I'm content. I am happy. And I think if Ferrari give him a car, he's gonna have a good time. I think if he's got that stable rear that he needs, which has been one of the big problems that the Mercedes has had. So, but yeah, Rory, your thoughts on Sir Lewis and his wonderful drive?
Do you know what's just going to hit like crack is it Australia that the season openers next year?
Yeah, Australia. Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton Q1 exit in a Ferrari. But no. That's not going to happen. I think I do think, like, I think back we've had conversations in our private chats and on here that we were going to make our judgments if this qualifying form was just the Mercedes car, or was it Lewis losing a bit of edge in a few tenths in the qualifying sphere. But I do think that's still a discussion that we can have going into next year, and we can see how the Ferrari rear end and so forth. But I think it's still today showed that Lewis is, if he is given the car on race day, he could be anyone. And you saw in the last few laps, he was taking tenths out of George. We don't know, George has probably been told to manage your tires, etc. But still, he got in. I think he got in under 5 seconds within George, I think.
Yeah, he got just under 5, and then he had a bit of an off, and then just, I think, decided to bring it home at that point. Yeah.
Well, I do agree with you. I think like Lewis has proved the media, the doubters wrong, questioning was he checked out after Brazil, and I think today just showed that he is still focused on doing the best for Mercedes, getting the best result they can in the constructors and so forth. And for himself, I think he still definitely has it. He hasn't lost anything. Like we said, the qualifying discussions can be made if he's having these issues in the Ferrari, which is all hypothetical, and we haven't seen it because he hasn't driven the Ferrari yet. But I do think, it was a great drive, a great 1-2 for Mercedes, and he proved that was wrong today.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, no, go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something really quick while we're talking about Lewis. Again, it's very clear I'm not a Mercedes fan, but with 2 races left to go, I think it would just be poetic if one of those races, or even if the sprint race, Lewis caps it out with a win. It's just fitting, in all senses of the word. It would be nice if that happens. Now, if they can keep going with the way they are in this race, and we all know it gets cold out in the desert, and the Mercedes seems to like the cold, so hopefully that comes true. But it'll be a nice way to end this time at the team.
I'd love for that to happen, but I don't think it will. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a struggle town. I think for Qatar and Abu Dhabi, but it would be lovely if he was able to pull it off. All right, Marshall, a quick one on Lewis for you.
Between 18 degrees in the night, 24 in the day in Losail next weekend. So let's see how that turns out for them. But that's that was a great race by Lewis. I think that we all lament the mistake that he did in qualifying, because would have been cool to send it up. I think George had a pretty good lap though, but it would have had them on the front row, and we would have had a proper battle between the two. But hey, that was a great recovery drive, and after the run of very poor results that Mercedes has had lately, and the tough races that he's had, it's good to see him to be happy about as this relationship comes to an end. I will say that, like, as someone who's not a huge Mercedes fan and watched through all the domination that Toto Wolff and Lewis subjected us to for the better part of a decade, in far more dominant form than we've seen in other points in history, I don't understand the contempt with which they've been treating Mercedes and Toto and just about all of it. Like, relationships and down, people move teams, and change is inevitable. And I think that, Hamilton fans should be celebrating the fact that he's going to race on well into his 40s, and that he's still going to be a feature on the grid, and it's not going to be in a Mercedes-Benz car anymore. It's going to be in a Ferrari, which is a new and exciting challenge, and something that we all want to see how that goes. And I don't think that there's really much to be gained by undermining the success that he has had as part of that team for the period of time that he had it, by just making this something that is not as toxic. It's like, I think that how, like, yeah, tones, but for every 10 things one thing he says, there's like 40 things that are uncontroversial, like, everybody has opinions, and the thing that gets tossed around is this one comment about, everyone has a shelf life. Well, drivers of all time, and he's treated him with admiration 40 other times, but it's the one comment that gets everybody up in arms. And I think that when you're in these periods of negotiation, and this has been a contentious period between them in terms of each other, I think in 2020 when he signed, he didn't want to sign long-term, Lewis, and it was pretty clear Mercedes wanted him there, but it was a disagreement over, money, among other things, and just how much they value. Things are subject to a lot of, posturing and media clips and saying things about one another. And when you're in a series of 1 or 2 or 1+1 deals that are coming up every year or so, eventually one side or the other is going to run out of patience with this status quo and move on. Whether it's Lewis initiating that move to Ferrari, which it does kind of sound like, Toto was taken aback at some level by that not being communicated to him. Good for him. He made a decision about his future that was on his terms, and I think we can celebrate that without running down Toto, without running down or making George Russell or conspiracy theories about treating them, or or any number of these things that you see on social media, it does get rather tiring to see it, because this is one of the greatest partnerships in the history of motor racing, Lewis Hamilton, Toto Benz. And I hope that in the last 2 races that can be celebrated properly, rather than the discourse being one of malcontent, discontent, conspiracy, and all sorts of other things, so that we can start a new chapter with Ferrari on fresh terms.
You're a far more hopeful man than me. Unfortunately, we both know that's not going to happen, is it? But I mean, I think the frustrating thing for me, being a Lewis fan, if I take my Mercedes hat off and put my Lewis hat on, I've got to get used to that for next year, so I might as well start now. Is that this was an easy win for Lewis this weekend. That one qualifying foul up is what cost him, and I think he knows it. The whole fan base knows it. It's just like that would have been a big 25 point, and it would have been the perfect way to end his time with the team by winning in Vegas. It would have been great. I mean, and we haven't really seen George and Lewis go head to head that many times. Like, you think of Brazil 22, but Lewis was hamstrung by a damaged car, and the only other one I can think of really was Suzuka last year, and that's it really. They haven't had a proper ding dong fight, so maybe we'll see it when Lewis is in a Ferrari. Who knows? But it's a shame that it hasn't happened as much as we would have liked. But wonderful drive again from Lewis Hamilton today. But we must move on. We got 2 more topics to cover, and what we're going to cover is Ferrari. And the first thing we're going to frame Ferrari with today is advantage Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship, because they took a lot of points out of McLaren today. I mean, Max sort of did them a favour by kind of keep holding them up, and that Ferrari did also screw themselves with late pit calls and everything else, but they still finished in front of their main rivals for the Constructors' Championship, both cars. And then both McLarens finished behind. It's 27 points now between them. I mean, it is razor, by constructors' terms, it is razor thin now between them. AJ, I'll come to you first. Welcome back. Are Ferrari the favourites for the Constructors' Championship as of the 24th of November 2024? Nope, he's gone. Okay. The joys of live internet shows. Rory, I'll come to you then in that case. Ferrari, are they the favourites at this point, or yeah?
I do think they are. If they have no mechanical failures and they have double points finishes for the remainder of the season, then yes, and they outmatch McLaren. We did see today in the race, they did have the old Ferrari again with their strategy department and pit stops and so forth, and the drivers as well. But if Fred Vasseur can tell both drivers again, this is our main goal, which they said that in the United States and Mexico, that we know the constructors is an opportunity to go for, then it's all go for Ferrari then, because if they can get their first title in how long of constructors?
2008 was the last one.
Yeah. Then it'll be, even though how the Tifosi is reacting to Carlos in the minute, Carlos and Leclerc are going to become legends. They're going to be like godlike figures in Ferrari if they manage to bring a constructors home. Even, I know it's not the driver level, but still constructors will mean anything to the people, the workers at Ferrari and the people in the town of Maranello, etc. But yeah, it's in Ferrari's hands, and I don't really feel comfortable and trustful in my heart saying when you say the word, it's all in Ferrari's hands. But you know how it usually goes.
Yeah, as soon as you put that into the world, they'll just find a way to screw it up in the most Italian way possible.
25 points is a lot, or 27, I guess it is. That's a pretty handy advantage to start with when your car is on par in performance. I think that you have to give on the sheer points. There's a good chance Ferrari could outscore them, but I still think that 25 points with 2 races to go is advantage McLaren. I also think that Ferrari was spectacularly lucky today because that non-penalty to Sainz for cutting the pit entry was a penalty at other races this year, and if it had have been Wittich, this that it would have been because they are, and this is something that I know AJ and I had a bit of a discussion on our episode earlier last week about the FIA fiascos that have been going on. When you can't change the rules or you can't codify the rules because it takes the agreement of all the teams and the FIA and Formula One, you end up managing races by race director notes on an event by event basis. And in some events, the pit lane entry has been defined differently than the definition in the rules, which, if I understood correctly, if Sainz had cut the pit lane any later, wouldn't it be the pit wall pretty near? Like, it was pretty late that he made that call. Ferrari wasn't ready for him. So the fact, first of all, that not staying out the extra lap didn't cost him a position in the race. And it was lucky that he didn't get a penalty for that because it wasn't in the race director's notes this weekend. All in all, I think Rui Marquez had a pretty good first race. He didn't really have a whole lot to do this weekend, which is perfect for your first race weekend. But, you know, these are the things that it doesn't matter who the race director is. The rule book needs to be consistent, because I think the problem that I have this weekend is that Karun and Martin were adamant that that was a slam dunk penalty. So if the people on Sky believe that it's a penalty, what chance do the viewers have? Like, if even the people who are closest to it think that something is a penalty, and then they go back and they dig and they say, actually, the rule book doesn't say anything specific. We've been managing this by like a race by race agreement within the race director notes, and there was nothing in the notes this weekend that said that that was a penalty, so it's nothing. It's really hard for viewers to understand the sport. And I hope that there's the willingness amongst the teams, Formula One and the FIA, to get together and start to codify these regulations so that they are consistent. And that takes having a new rule book. And that's nothing that the FIA can do on its own. Anyway, I know I've got us off topic, but I just think Ferrari was really lucky today to not cost themselves at least a position to Verstappen and with a penalty. So yeah, that's why I'm not sold on Ferrari's day.
Yeah, they did get lucky with the Sainz one. I mean, the only other time I've known somebody to get away with that was when Lewis got investigated after Germany 2018 with the whole like in thing with Bono, and then he followed Kimi in and then went across the grass and somehow he got away with it. I don't know, but that's the only time I've ever known anyone get away with that. It's normally slam dunk. So very lucky escape there for Carlos Sainz. Now AJ is here. He's our resident Ferrari fan. Hold back on Carlos Sainz, please. What we are talking about is, are they the favourites for the Constructors' Championship?
See, the thing is, I don't know if they're favourites because Qatar is a McLaren favourite track. So with that being said, and with there being a sprint there, unless there's a disaster class at McLaren which is not on the books, I mean off the books, um, that we still are in it with a chance. I think if they keep pushing the way they have been pushing the tail end of the season, second half of the season, there's still a shot for Ferrari. But right now, again, because the second last track favors the McLarens, I'm a bit doubtful. I don't want to get my hopes up too high. I've been saying that this may be the year that we finally break the curse since '08. Um, best thing we could do is hopefully it works out, but I don't want to get ahead of myself at the moment. We'll see what happens. There's too much. I think there's going to be too much infighting in the last two races.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that very shortly. Personally, based on, I mean, yeah, Qatar, I think is going to be the key weekend in all of this because, it is a McLaren favoured track, but McLaren really have been scoring own goals all season, and I can see them dropping the bag. It's not out the realms of possibility. Norris has been he's been okay, but he does have mistakes in him. I mean, Piastri, since he won in Baku, and I basically crowned him the world champion for next year, has just dropped in generational stinker after generational stinker, really, apart from the Brazil sprint, which he then had to hand over. I think Ferrari might do it. I hate to say it, but I think they might. I just think they might pull this off. And I mean, what a way to welcome Lewis Hamilton to the team then by saying, "Oh, welcome to the top garage, the world championship team." Yes, and now let's hopefully go and get that driver's title. But it'd be a massive feather in the cap if they did it. And how old school is this to see McLaren versus Ferrari for the constructors? It's great.
I will say it is really, really exciting, and I think it's the first time in a long time that we've seen so many flags hung outside of Maranello. So it's good fun. It's good fun.
Great fun indeed. Okay, so let's talk about the drama that Ferrari had. And AJ, I'm going to come to you first. I'm just going to preface it so people may not have seen it. Safe to say, Charles Leclerc was not happy at the end of the race. I don't think I've ever heard Charles swear as much as he did. By the way, why was he not called before the stewards for all that swearing? I have and Yuki Tsunoda swearing live on Sky Sports as well. Yeah, just come on. Unless you're finally treating the drivers like adults. He was not happy. And basically what happened is after the second pit stop, Charles came out in front of Carlos. And then Carlos was told, well, there's a bit of mixed messaging here because Charles was told Carlos was told not to attack, whereas Carlos was told don't do anything stupid, basically. I think he wasn't told not to race. Charles wasn't happy. He felt there'd been a pre-race agreement in place that had been contravened, and he said this is not the first time that Carlos has done it. And essentially, he just said, "F this, I'm out. I'm just gonna focus on myself." And considering that they are this close to potentially winning a constructors' championship, this is a big test of Fred Vasseurs' leadership because he's got to get on top of it, get these two saying, "Look, if you're going to go do your own thing, fine, but just remember what we're fighting for." And don't get in the way of each other, and stop dicking about, basically, because we can win this championship. I don't care what personal beef you have right now. We can win this. There is the full quote from Charles. So yeah, AJ, I know you've been wanting to have a go at Carlos for a while. In you come.
See, the thing is, it's not necessarily me wanting to have a go with Carlos, right? I'm going to preface this by saying that, look, he is a good driver. But am I glad to see him out the door at Ferrari? Yes, I am. Because 5 times, not even 5 times, 7 or 8 times out of 10, he does not play the team game. Even when Charles has the quicker car and is behind him, he refuses to let him through. And when Charles backs off, he was like, that was the agreement, fine. But when he is told to back off from Charles, never really listens to it and just keeps pushing. And he has lost Ferrari points before because he doesn't listen to team orders. Right? People praise him for everything that he does, being certain about what he wants to do. It's a great quality to have, sure, but at a point as crucial as this in this season right now, you are costing the team points. There were many points during the race where Charles was lapping significantly quicker than Carlos, right? He was matching Lewis lap for lap with fastest laps. He was on par with Lewis in terms of pace. He was told to give way to Charles, but he did not. And then what he does is he ends up creating a train between him, Max, and Charles, which again cost them from chasing the Mercs. Like, why are you doing that? Because Charles was matching and gaining on Lewis at one point.
He did let him
until no, dude, rewatch.
He did let him buy once.
Yeah, once out of how many times when he was clearly lapping faster. This is not the first time Carlos has done this, by the way. He has done this multiple times.
No, and I mean, like, he did.
Go ahead.
I understand that, but at the same time, he's leaving. Like, Ferrari gave him, before the season had even started, he has done, his terms of performing and not been given the best, not been given the support enough times to have the confidence that they're going to have tires ready for him in the pit lane. So I understand his frustration, and a lot of the hesitation that I have in these debates with you about Charles is he should have had the gloves off long ago. If Carlos is really not a team player and he really feels as if he's aggrieved, then why weren't the gloves off long before now? And he's so hard on his sleeve for Ferrari that he always comes back and says, okay, I'll play the team game. But then Carlos goes out and just runs his own race in his own way and somehow ends up in front of Charles on the track again. And it just keeps, you have one driver who's faster, but driver who's smarter, right? I know that that's going to get with you on this, but who's smarter often than the team. And then honestly, advantage of a situation in order to end up in an advantageous position later on. And he'll just take that every single time. Thank you very much. And Charles needs to figure out that his teammate is not his friend, and figure out that if your teammate is going to play tough, then you'd have to play tough too. And it's this issue that I think, like with Fred, that he's going to have to manage this with Lewis and Charles. But those two are probably going to have fireworks at certain points and times next year too. Like, is Charles going to accept, having been the guy at Ferrari for all this time, and then Lewis comes in and seem to be getting preference? Is he going to absolutely just, fall in line with that? Or is this going to be fireworks too? Because he's had this Carlos Sainz problem for 4 years now. You'd think that he could figure out that the guy has no loyalty to Ferrari. He has every loyalty to himself. He's going to a crap box that can put cars together because their current drivers keep crashing them. So, he's got no guarantee of success for any point in his career. And he's been on the podium, 3 out of the last 4 races. Like, you can't compare his performances as an individual. And at this point, I don't actually blame him for, sticking it to Charles at this point in his career. What he got to lose? I mean, the big teams aren't taking him. He's going to a minnow next year. These could be the last points in his career that he's ever on the podium. Like,
So
has a career at Ferrari for as long as he wants it. Miracle happens. Carlos not take the opportunities being given.
But here's the thing, right? Like with what you're saying exactly.
It froze on me.
Yeah, no, like with what you were talking about in how he's not going to a big team, don't you think there's a reason why big teams did not jump at the opportunity with Carlos being available? It is very evident he's not a team player. And with Charles, if you listen to the radio, it came down to one thing. Charles and the way he drives, he runs it on respect. He goes, you respect the team, you respect your teammate, you respect your other driver. Right? It's not even a matter of being fair or not. It's a matter of respect. And I think that's one thing that you won't have to worry about with Lewis, because when you have Lewis and Charles, both of them are respectful drivers. They both understand that the team comes first, and they both have a lot of respect for one another. Again, we spoke about, I think, Rory, you brought this up earlier, how Max doesn't worry about Charles because of the respect that he has for Charles. The big issue and the big sticking point here, and I think that was where the bubble burst yesterday for Charles, was he was sick and tired of being disrespected as a teammate. And that's where time and again, don't get me wrong, Carlos is a good driver, but he is not a team driver. Neither is he a respectful teammate. In race, not out of race, on the track, on race day, he is not a respectful teammate.
I mean, I do feel like Carlos has kind of grown up in the Alonso school. Like, it's just, yeah, he's. I mean, I remember watching the first series of Drive to Survive, and he was like, Fernando Alonso's my hero. Like, and it's the same sort of stuff that Fernando would do. If he was in that Ferrari right now. I mean, Rory, what's your take on all of this with Carlos and Charles? I mean, I'll be honest. I did think I did think Carlos did do Charles a bit dirty there, and I think Charles had every right to be pissed off.
Yeah, I could see there was points in the race where there was some spicy radio message, of course, from Charles with the one. I think that stood out to me. It was not the one we showed on stream, the one that he said, make sure you say that radio message, what you told me in Spanish, to Carlos. And I think that was very telling of what Charles thought in that moment. Yes, there's adrenaline and there's heat in the moment as well. They probably would have spoken to each other after the race in a more closed environment where they can both talk about it without cameras in front of them. So I do think there is maybe blowing out, the fans could be blowing out proportion a little bit, but I do think, yes, there has been calls where Carlos, you have seen that he has taken his own initiative and he's benefited from it, and Charles may have been hampered from it. The one at the start in the race where we had Carlos overtaking Leclerc because Leclerc had a tear off in his floor or in his side pod, I think, because he was losing about 3 seconds a lap. Like he had issues in that car until he did his pit stop, and then he was fine. Yes, Carlos, I do think there's a part of me where I think Carlos thinks this is like Marshall said, just know if he's going to be on the podium in his next few years of his career, or he's going to win a race. I think he's just going to try and take as much as possible what he can. I would like to see how Qatar goes, to see has anything changed, have they said anything to each other or not. There will be quotes in the media, of course, afterwards. In that press day on Qatar, they'll talk about, of course. It will be a test of Vasseurs' character to try and cool this down again and get both drivers focused on the goal of getting the constructors, trying to actually win the constructors fight, because Vasseur probably knows, and everyone knows, dealing with Ferrari, when you have an unstable driver lineup, it doesn't go too well. And I think Vasseur will want to try and keep this under wraps and cool down until the season where they can go their separate ways. Carlos can go to Williams in the post Abu Dhabi test, and Charles can get ready to prepare to battle Lewis next season.
Yeah, I mean, all great points there, and there's a couple of things as well that I think need raising at this point as well. I mean, I think Charles wasn't just annoyed because he felt like agreements have been breached. Charles is still trying to chase Lando for P2 and the drivers, and it was said quite jokingly, but there was an element of seriousness to this when there was a video of George and Lando doing an interview together, and they said, "Oh, we found out on Thursday that Charles got a cheeky little clause in his contract," but it's like, yeah, no, that you say it jokingly, but that's quite serious. Like that could be quite a massive incentive for Charles to chase Lando down. So I think Charles would have been a bit annoyed that Carlos essentially cost him that chance to get closer to Lando in the points, with Lando also getting the fastest lap as well, which that could be crucial in the Constructors' Championship. But also, like, yes, I agree. I take Marshall's point that Carlos is thinking for himself because he may not get this chance again. On the flip side of that, it's been very obvious to see that Carlos is on maneuvers right now and is trying to get Red Bull to look at him again. If they get rid of Perez and say, look, if you want to buy me out my Williams contract, that would be lovely. I know it was rumored a few weeks ago. He clearly wants it. He's made no secret of the fact that he wants it because it would be a chance to be in front-running machinery rather than being at the back. Whether Red Bull are happy to do it, I don't know. I don't think Max would care personally. I think Max would look at Carlos.
It's more the background. It's more the families. I think Max is fine with Carlos being his teammates. I think he knows he can beat Carlos. I think it's Jos Verstappen and Carlos Senior. I think there's a bit of
I mean, if Carlos Jr. is on maneuvers, that suggests to me that I think Carlos Senior is more than happy for him to go and do it. If there was such major issues, then I think you wouldn't see him putting on the comments that he has been doing in the press to say, look, hello, come and get me type thing.
Well, it's just funny that like he signed that deal with Williams and he already knows that he regrets it. He should have held out right to the very end because there was going to be a seat left for him at a crummy team, and arguably he probably signed for one of the crummiest. So would it have been the end of the world if he had ended up on the sidelines for a year and been like a Hulkenberg style super sub waiting for the next driver in one of the top teams to flounder and be picked up that way rather than going to a team that is seen as being sort of beneath your talents? I had these, debates with people about Williams, like they could use a driver who doesn't crash the car all the time. That would be very helpful to them. But at some point, what does it advantage somebody like Carlos Sainz to go to a team like Williams where you're not able to show this same level of performance and go for wins and podiums every weekend like you are right now? He's somebody that was very impressive for McLaren. I think McLaren probably still thinks highly of him. They just don't have an opening right now. Obviously, he doesn't have an opening at Mercedes because they want Antonelli. And, Red Bull are Red Bull. They keep it in-house at the costs of competitiveness, it seems. Like they're keeping Perez as he flounders, and we still don't know what they're going to do in 2025 because they seem to be all about Max and they don't want to do anything that's going to upset Max or Max's camp. So Sainz is just in a position where there's no clear options, but if he's the best option sitting there waiting for a ride, I can't imagine that there wouldn't be a team looking at its options very quickly into 2025 if things don't start out the way that they want. and he would have been better to just sit on the sidelines for a season. But I know that's easier said than done. You're a driver, you want to compete, you want to be on the grid, and if you're not there, they're not thinking of you. But I think that, you know, Alonso took 2 years off, came back, was great. You know, I think Hulkenberg did like his super sub gig for a couple of years and then came back, and he's been excellent this year. And you know, I don't think it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, Kimi took several years off and came back and was excellent. I think Sainz's better play was to just, you know, hold out, because now he's in this position where he's like, geez, I gotta go to there. It's not a great position to be in.
Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue in the Red Bull garage if you have both Carlos and Max, with the already existing unrest right now between Horner, Joss, and Helmet? Toss in Carlos Sr. into the mix.
I don't know.
That'd be chaos.
I don't know. I mean, do Max and Carlos Senior or Yoss and Carlos Senior get along as it is? Probably not. But I mean, you do say, you know, is Carlos Sainz in the junior in the Alonso mold? No, he's in the Carlos Sainz Senior mold, who was the World Rally champion, who kept moving teams every time he got beaten. So he would go to Ford, or he won his 2 titles with Toyota, then got beaten by Ford, so went to Ford, then got beaten by Toyota, so went back to Toyota, then got beaten by Subaru, so went to Subaru. It's like he was always going to the team that beat him and never won another championship after his initial 2 with Toyota in the early 90s. And he was competitive right into the 2000s, but just like Fernando Alonso, he never got his 3rd world title because he was always chasing a 1 or 2 year deal with whoever was on top of the world rather than developing with that team. And he was constantly changing. And the sport had changed by then, where Sebastian Loeb was building up, you know, Citroën to be the machine that was going to dominate for the next decade, and Carlos was still in mercenary mode, where he was signing with whoever built the best rally car on any particular previous year. And I think that guidance is just showing on how Carlos manages his own career and his son's career. And it is similar, I guess, to Alonso, but I think that you don't need to really look at Alonso. You can just look at his father's rally career and his series of ill-timed team moves to see that.
I think also there's a point that Max, you probably kind of like know about Harry Kane and his brother being his agent. That when you haven't working with family in your career, it doesn't always. There's always a bit of. There's not much rootlessness in that family. Like, you're a bit too comfortable, and we've seen it with. There's another thing is like we know Carlos, his cousin, is his manager, or is it, yeah, his cousin. That also could come play, that his influence of the Carlos Senior and his family is kind of maybe steering him away from, like you say, double, like that he's like from Carlos's career. He was at Toro Rosso, broke out of his Toro Rosso contract to go to Renault halfway through the 2017 season. Then he goes to Renault for a year and he gets replaced by Ricciardo, goes to McLaren. And then he leaves McLaren because Ferrari were going to go for Ricciardo, but then they saw Sainz was available and McLaren let him go. He went to Ferrari and now he's going to Williams. And I do agree, double that. I think he should have actually, the Audi option could have been an even better option for him, even though they're terrible. That they're not at least they're not having a team. They're not having a situation where their car is being crashed every race and so forth. Or he could have done sabbatical and waited it out and said, like you said, be a super sub. If we know how's Jack Doohan going to do at Alpine next year, we know how Flavio is with drivers. He's going to probably, if Jack is not being competitive, we know that Flavio has been doing rumors. There's rumors going around that he was inquiring about Franco Colapinto. If Sainz was on the market, they would have probably I think they would happily have taken Sainz back at Renault, especially, and Sainz would be happy because he knows he's getting a Mercedes work engine in 2026. So I do think there is, like you said, though, there is regrets of Carlos going to Williams next year in himself, that he's happily wanting to help. Can you free me from this situation?
Well, chaps, that has been. I mean, I agree with you. Carlos is regretting it, and regrettably, I'm afraid I have to say that is the end of this week's episode of Shifting Happens, because we could go on about that for hours. And if only there was another forum in which we could communicate. Oh, wait, there is. If you're watching live with us, I will be hosting one of my last Twitter spaces. I'm going to be doing it at 10 p.m. UK time, which I think is 5 o'clock in North America. 5 o'clock. Yep. So I'll be there live on Twitter in about an hour and 20 minutes time. I need to go eat some food. But that has been episode 5 of Shifting Happens. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please do like, comment, subscribe. It really means a lot to us. We're really appreciating the support that you've given us in this venture that we've done, and the various little episodes that we're doing. We've got some more content planned for both before the end of the season and after the end of the season, and we look forward to sharing that with you. A huge thank you, as always, to Rory. Where can we find you on social media?
So you can find me on Rory Talks F1 on Twitter. You can find me Rory Talks Motorsport on Instagram and Threads, which I'm starting to use more and more on Threads now because there's a much more engaging community on there. And maybe I might turn up on Blue Sky. I don't know yet.
Marshall, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Threads, DBL Wave Yellow, and on Instagram as well. I'm still figuring out Instagram. I'm old. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm still figuring it out. Yeah, Blue Sky maybe in the future. But for now, you can find me on Threads. I'm pretty active there, chatting away with people about F1 and other forms of racing.
AJ, where can we find you?
For now, still Twitter, Shiva Me Eaters, but I'm starting to use Threads a bit more. Once I'm a bit more active on there, then it'll be Threads and potentially Blue Sky.
Perfect. You can find me, BaxTB F1 on Twitter, BaxTB F1 on Threads as well. Like everyone, I've recently joined Threads. I'm not sure I'm going to head to Blue Sky just yet. I'm going to keep my eyes on that and see what happens. But shout out to the F1 Threads Twitter community. We've all been welcomed with open arms by those guys, and it's a really lovely community. So if you want a bit more of a chill F1 community, I can highly recommend Threads. Get yourself over there. It's a really, really great place. So thank you to Rory, thank you to Marshall, thank you to AJ, thank you to our brilliant producer as always, Fly, who has been working very diligently away in the background. You can find him on Twitter and on Threads, I think, and Instagram. Definitely Blue Sky as well. But yes, from all of us here at Shifting Happens, thank you very much, and until next time, stay safe, and we shall speak to you all very, very soon.